Welcome back to MacBreak Studio. We are looking at motion, and Mark is going to show us a night sky effect that he built on the plane on the way out here to Prescott, right?
Pretty much so, yeah. So I thought we'd do something where we build something from scratch. So I'll show you what we're going to do. I've got here this little scene of some stars that are blinking in the background. A little hard to tell, but if you watch for a while, they're each kind of twinkling. We've got clouds going in front of a moon, obscuring the moon, and the moon gets revealed behind the clouds. So what I want to do is create this in motion from scratch using just elements that are built into motion.
In the library, the content library.
Yeah, so nothing else.
It comes in handy, that library, doesn't it?
It comes quite in handy. So the way we're going to start to do this is I'm going to go exactly to the library, and I'm going to go to Content, and I'm going to go to Particle Images for the stars. I'm going to go down to this basic blur and click Apply to put it on my screen.
The basis for all stars.
Yeah, this little blur is going to be my stars. So now what I'm going to do is click the little replicator button, or you can press the L key to create a replicator. And I'm going to go right to the inspector and add in some very specific criteria for how I size it up. I could basically just drag it here to get roughly where I want, but I'm going to give you some specific numbers here. So first of all, I'll make sure it's a rectangle. I'm going to set it to a random fill because stars don't appear on a grid, right? I'm going to change the size to about 1200 by 800. So the width of about 1200. Actually, that's not right. I'm going to change the width to about 1800, and the height to right about there. I'm just going to basically roughly 1920 by 1080, which is the size of my screen. Then we need a lot more than 5 stars, which is the default here. So I'm going to crank that way up to like 200 stars. So Whoa. I've got a whole lot of stars. I know that looks a little crazy right now, but just hang with me for a minute here. I'm going to change the scale of the stars to 4%.
Turn your scars into stars.
Yeah.
Sorry.
But still have the scale N be 100%. So now they're quite a bit smaller. And I'm also going to set the scale randomness to 20 because we have stars that are closer and further away of different sizes in the sky here. So it's hard to see the stars because we have a little X for every representation of a copy of a replicator. So I'm going to turn off this overlay with Command / and there we can see all our stars. But if we play, nothing happens to them at all. And
I'm not blinking, not twinkling.
No, and I'm going to leave those overlays off so we don't see all those X's for right now. So the next thing I want to do is take those stars and kind of bring them to life. And since I've got a replicator, I'm going to jump right to the shortcut menu for behaviors and select replicator and select the single sequence replicator behavior. And that's what I'm going to use to animate the stars to blink on and off. So I want to add the opacity parameter to do so. I'm not going to have them go all the way to disappear. I'll go down to about 15%, so they get dimmer. And then the sequencing, instead of having them all go to 15% opacity, I'm actually going to set this to through. And then the spread is how many of them are affected at a time. I'll set that to about 20, so it spreads out the animation. And then I'm also going to have this thing loop. And I'll have it loop about 5 times. And the way you figure this out is trial and error. Basically what I do is I play back the project while I'm adjusting these parameters until I get something I like. So
you can see them twinkling and blinking now.
Yeah, you see them twinkling and blinking. And it's more than you'd see in a real sky, but it needs to be obvious or people are going to miss it. So that, in a nutshell, is how to do the basic of getting a nice starry sky. And you can vary it by choosing a different element to start with, how big they are, but that gets you a sky. But I thought I'd take it a little further than that. So what I'm going to do now is add the moon. So luckily, in Library, in Content,
there's a moon?
There's a moon. In fact, I used a little search magnifying glass here and type moon. And there it is.
It's a harvest moon.
It's a harvest moon. It's a big old harvest moon. So the first thing I'm going to do is turn my overlays back on, Command / and scale that guy down. I don't want it to be quite so big. And the other thing about the moon is I really don't like it to be yellow in this case. I want more of a bluish, almost black and white kind of look. So what I'm going to do is go to the Filters pop-up menu to Color Correction and choose Hue Saturation. So I'm pressing F7 to bring up the heads-up display, and I'm going to desaturate this pull the saturation out so we have more of a black and white looking moon here. But it's a little bright to my eye, and we really can't see a lot of the detail. So I'm going to go back to the Filters little pop-up menu here, go to Color Correction, Levels. And here, there's nothing in the heads-up display for me to use, so I'll go to the inspector for the filters, and we have basically a
just
histogram.
Like Photoshop levels.
Yeah, it's kind of like
the
a histogram.
input and output for black and white.
So I'm going to drag in the black level. You can see I can really give the moon a little more punch.
Well, it's nice
by
to
doing
show this because a lot of people don't know these kinds of tools are built into Motion.
And
I
that's
mean,
why
this is fantastic.
That's why I thought I'd throw a lot of this stuff in just so you get a sense of what's in there. So I've turned the before and after.
That's huge. That's
really,
a big,
really makes it pop,
big
doesn't it?
difference, yeah.
So pretty nice. So now what I want to do is add these clouds. And there's many ways to do this, but the way I'm going to do it here, I'm going to go back to the library, to generators, and let me turn off the search field so everything comes back. I'll go to the built-in generators, and there's one called clouds, conveniently enough. So I'll click apply, and the clouds come in on top of everything.
Yeah.
So they obscure everything. We'll deal with that within a minute, but first I want to get them to look a little nicer. There's a lot of parameters here, but what I'm going to point to you here is down with these layer strengths. I like to play with these just to get them to look a little bit more the way I want them.
Maybe less fractally.
Yeah, less fractally. Just have them kind of spread out a little bit more, maybe something a little more like that. Something, I like drag most of these down to almost to 0. Something roughly like that. Now, I'm also going to adjust, if we play it, they are morphing very quickly, and that's the speed right here. So I'm going to also bring that down quite a bit so they don't change quite nearly as fast. Just a nice, gentle, slow morphing of the clouds. The other thing is they don't really move, and I'd like to have them be drifting around a little bit, drifting across the screen. I'm jumping up the speed a little bit more. So to have them move, what I'm going to do is go to the inspector for that.
Yeah. Is there a drift behavior?
There's not a drift. Well, there is a drift behavior, but it would make the whole generator move off the screen. But if we notice, there is a offset here, and if I pop that open and drag on X, see how that makes them move?
Yes.
By dragging on X. So whenever you do that, you're like, aha, parameter behavior is what should come to your mind. So I'm going to right click on the X. I'm going to choose add parameter behavior rate, because I want to apply a constant rate of change to that parameter. Now I'm going to set the speed to something very low. I'm going to go minus 0.03, so they drift to the right. Minus will go to the right. And if I play that back, we now have a nice slow drift of those clouds, and they're also morphing and changing as they drift.
Yep.
Okay. Now the problem is we can't see anything underneath them.
We lost our stars and our moon.
We lost them, yeah. So one idea would be to do a blend mode, you might think. This is where there's a lot of ways to do things. So if I put a blend mode of add, it'll add the pixel values to the lower one. So the black has a pixel value of 0. So it'll allow everything to show through.
That's good.
And that looks pretty good. But the clouds are actually making the moon brighter, and I'd like them to obscure the moon, okay?
Right.
So as another option, I'm going to go back to none, and what I'm going to do instead, or normal, I'm going to add a key to this. So with this clouds generator selected, I'll go back to the filters pop-up menu, and I'll choose keying Lumic here. And what that does is it keys out the lighter or darker parts of the image. In this case, it's keying out the darker parts by default, and I can play with how much gets keyed out by dragging these sliders.
You're playing with the tolerances basically.
Yeah, exactly. You can invert it and it would get rid of the opposite, but that's not what we want. We want something like this, because I really want the moon to get obscured by these clouds as they drift by. So that way, it's because that's what happens, right? When clouds go by, they hide the moon, and that's what I want to see happen. And that's the basic idea. I think I would play with these clouds a little bit more to get it a little bit more, look more like my example here that I played. Oh, and the way I did that is I went into the gradient itself. So I select the generator, it has a gradient, and here's where I just made the cloud color a little more in the dark blue, or I could actually make it gray and then colorize it.
If there's a night sky, it would
it's
be
a night sky. Yeah, the clouds are not going to be bright white like that.
They're not going to be white,
They're going to be a lot darker like that, or I could tint the whole scene. So, and I can also tint the black part of the generator to be like a really dark blue.
Right.
Really, really dark blue there, something like that. And that way I can get it to look a lot like the sample I made right here, where we've got the clouds drifting across. So that, in a nutshell, is how to very quickly create a nice night moonshot for your next little project.
Excellent. So thank you, Mark, for taking your Twinkle Twinkle Little Star tutorial to the next level and adding some clouds obscura. And we want to thank you for watching MacBreak Studio. You want to check out rippletrain.com. We probably have the most comprehensive set of motion tutorials anywhere on the planet. You want to check those out, and follow us on Twitter and Facebook, and feel free to email us when you, well, maybe you don't want to email us, but yeah, maybe you do. But we're always glad to hear from you. And thank you for watching another episode of MacBreak Studio.